Hello there. So Apache Druid 0.21.0 was just released, and I thought it would be cool to make a video just showing you how to do the Druid Quickstart and update it since my last video on the subject. And this video is meant to be for people who are trying out Druid for the first time, to show you how easy it is to dip your toes in the water. Right here I'm running macOS Big Sur, but the steps of this quick start have really not changed for quite a while, and macOS or any Linux operating system will pretty much be exactly the same. So first of all, you must make sure you have Java installed. Hopefully if you're trying out Druid, you already have Java installed, but if not, it should be very easy to do in your operating system. Now, the first step, obviously, you have to download Druid. I already did that because I don't want to download this in part of this video, make you all jealous about how fast my connection is. So I'll just skip to the next step. So first, let's unpack it. Right, this command right here, we unpack Druid and we change into the newly unpacked directory. In here we can see all of the cool Druid things that came with this bundled binary, and of particular interest is this bin directory, which has all the cool scripts that just start Druid and do really useful stuff. So if we look at what's in this bin directory, we see all sorts of stuff, but the specifically interesting scripts are the ones that are prefixed with start. So all of these scripts do something. They start a certain Druid cluster, and one of the scripts we'll be using here is the start micro quick start. It's just going to start all the Druid services on one single machine, in this case my laptop, and it's going to make it very easy to play around with it. And this is an installation that's tuned to work well with a limited amount of RAM, as you would have on just one machine, and it's good to play around with the data ingestion and the querying. But if you are gonna play around with a bigger cluster, maybe a bigger production load, you might want to have a different, you might want to use one of the different configurations. In any case, this one is going to work very nicely on the laptop. So as I started, it's going to start a whole bunch of scripts, and actually in the background it went and verified that I had the right version of Java and that the right ports were open. So hopefully if this didn't work as easily, maybe it gave you some error message. Hopefully it's self-explanatory what's the issue. Once these commands are running, all I have to do is go to localhost and then 8888, which is the port of the Druid Console. Here we have the Druid Console, and I'm actually going to expand this full screen because the rest of this tutorial can be done directly through this console. This console actually received a nice refresh, just stylistically. The fonts, the icons, all of the stuff was really tightened up in this release of Druid, which is part of the reason I really wanted to do this video. But without further ado, let's have a quick look here. So I started an empty cluster. I have no data sources, no segments, one of every service, no lookups, and no tasks. And you can browse around here, but there's really nothing to see until you start something. So when you go to the load data stage, you see all of the different places where you can load data from into Druid. And for this quick start, I'm going to just use the Wikipedia example datasets. What it actually is a HTTP hosted dataset that's available from Druid, and it's a standard test dataset in which a lot of tutorials are based on. It's just a day of edits on Wikipedia. And it's a very small dataset, but it's perfect to load if you're just playing around with this on a laptop. So here it's giving you a preview of the data that is in this file, and you can open this file yourself in your browser and verify that this is the data that's inside of it. So this looks correct. And what I'm doing here is I'm going through this wizard. This is a wizard flow to help you make a Druid spec that will cause Druid to load your data. Unlike some databases, Druid isn't expecting you to just push your data into it one event at a time. Instead, it wants you to it wants you to say, hey, Druid, my data is over here. In this case, at this HTTP URL, go and fetch it. And this is the wizard to help me configure that schema. So right now it auto-detected that that this data should be parsed as JSON. That's accurate, and I can see I have all the columns looking really good here. Just for comparison, and you don't have to do this, but if I tell it actually this is CSV data, and let's say I say it doesn't have a header, or let's say it does have a header, and I click apply. This now looks like total nonsense because it's trying to split and comma, but this is actually JSON data, so I'm getting this weird, obviously incorrect parsing. So let's go back into Sanity and select JSON. Great. Next is the time parsing step. So this is the step where Druid will try to figure out, okay, what is the time column, the primary time column of this data. Druid is really designed to work really well with data that is time variant. So you have some system that's emitting data all the time, like maybe some event is happening, maybe users visiting your website, maybe it's metrics in your cluster. In any case, most of these kind of data sets have a primary timestamp. And Druid really wants to make sure it gets it right because Druid does its primary partitioning on this timestamp. In this case, it actually detected it correctly because this data was actually shaped already like a timestamp, and Druid can run heuristics and figure out, oh, it's probably this column. So there's nothing to do in this step. Next is I can actually transform the data and maybe make some row by row transformation. For example, I have this column here called deleted, and I could make a column called deleted +1, and I'll just give it an expression. These are Druid expressions. I'm not really going to go into it. I'm just demonstrating what you can do here. You can do any kind of like row by row transformation of the data, rename a column, maybe split a column into two, or combine two columns into one. Very simple cleanup tasks like that. And to all of these steps, they should link to the documentation. So please just read that if you're interested in more information. Similarly, I can use this step to filter out my data, again, on a row by row basis. So if I didn't want to ingest all the data, maybe I'm interested in a specific country or a specific user, I could have filtered it out at this step, but I'm just going to take everything. Lastly, I have my schema configuration step where I can say, okay, what is the string? What data types do I have? What is the ordering of the columns? The ordering of the columns can sometimes be meaningful, but I'm not going to go into that. That's a more advanced topic. And one of the cool features of Druid, like one of the really, really awesome things that Druid does, is this ability to do rollup. And I'm not going to go into this in this video because it's a bit too advanced for this video. And as you can see, rollup is off by default. If rollup is off by default, Druid will behave exactly like you'd expect a database to behave. Every single row in my input file will become a row in Druid. Next, I can tell Druid how to partition my data. So primarily, Druid will be partitioning the data by time, and I can choose how big segments should be. And secondarily, I can futz about with partitioning options. Again, the defaults are probably going to be okay here, and definitely okay for the Quickstart. And again, I can fine-tune some basics. For example, how long will Druid wait for the URL to time out if this URL has to time out. All the defaults will work for me, and you see all the advanced configuration options are hidden, so you really don't need to worry about this step. Lastly is publishing the data. So what will this dataset be called in Druid? Druid, in this case, auto-guessed the name Wikipedia, and I think that's fine for our purposes. And I'm going to just say, let's go. So this whole wizard basically generated this spec. If you want to read more about the spec, you should follow the documentation. but every step we made along along the way in the wizard was responsible for something here. And now we can submit it to Druid, and you know, it's very possible that when you load data into Druid, you wouldn't use the wizard flow. You could programmatically generate that spec yourself, and maybe have some system that automatically like creates new data in Druid as when a certain event triggers. Everything here is driven by APIs. This console is just a web UI that's interacting with Druid using the well-documented APIs, and you're welcome to explore that by either reading the documentation or by actually looking at what this console does, like by looking at the network tab and seeing what request it's making. In any case, you can see it created this task, and this task went out and fetched the data and turned it into a Druid segment and did all of the things. And this task actually succeeded, so it's marked a success. I guess I talked over it for long enough. But it only took 8 seconds, so I can't be blamed too much. And now if I go into my data sources, I can see there is that data source, Wikipedia. I can see the size of the data source. It's tiny, but so cute. And I can see how many rows it has and average row size and lots of other interesting information. Here is that segment. So that's very cool. And next, you know, from here, I could go and just say query with SQL. And this will take me to the SQL view for this data source. And I could have also just gone to the query view, just clicked here and then selected it. So this is a very simple SQL querying interface. It's very useful when you're loading data, if you're playing around with Druid, to play around with this view and understand how Druid works and how Druid querying works. Druid has 2 ways of querying it, using SQL or using a JSON-based native query language. I really recommend that you use SQL and don't even look at the native querying language unless you have a specific need. So this UI should be familiar to anybody who's familiar with a SQL UI. And it has a few nice things about it. It has a few IntelliSense things. I can, for example, click here and ask it to show a specific channel, and ask it to show, or maybe add a comment as another group by, and look at comment and channel. One thing to note here is that sometimes if you click on just like these show things, you might get this, you say query return no data, especially if you're doing this quick start. And the reason here is that by default this generates a filter that says only give me the last day of data. It's just a nice default. It's usually what you care about. But I can delete it here. And now if I rerun this query, I'll get all the data back. Another thing not to just be aware of here is that if you have a large dimension, for example, page, there's lots of pages in Wikipedia. So if I look at page, it says here 99 plus results returned. Wow, well, what does it mean, 99 plus results? How many pages are there? Well, probably more than 99. And this is because there's this Autolimit thing. And this is just a convenient thing that this UI does, because if you have a big data set, the kind that you would want to put into Druid, it's very likely you have some columns that are very, very big. And just pulling that data out and into your browser might not be the best thing to do. But you can always turn it off if that bothers you. And you can rerun the query and you can see, oh boy, I have so many results. And it took about 10 times longer to run this query, even though it was still very quick. Because I didn't limit it to anything, so it was just sending all of this data over the network. I like to leave it on, but just don't get caught out by it. And lastly, I'll say that this view is a great view to learn the different parts of the Druid SQL language. So for example, if I add if I start typing sum or approx count distinct, a much more advanced thing than sum, let's say approx count distinct of user as num users. I'm gonna run this. But what I want to say is that as you start typing these things, they will give you some IntelliSense, and they'll actually pull in the documentation from the Druid website. So again, if you're not familiar with the Druid SQL language, and you can either go and read the docs, or you can just use it from here, and hopefully this view will give you suggestions as and when needed. So this is Druid, and if you just wanted to understand, okay, a very quick start in Druid, how to get the basics going, you can stop the video here and go away. But I wanted to go just a little bit further. So if you're interested, stick around. The next step, just for fun, I want to add a lookup to Druid, and then I will join it onto my data. So what is a lookup? Well, if I look at this channel column, and let's remove this the aggregator that I don't need. If I look at this channel column, I see that my channels are not in a very human readable form. I mean, I can recognize some of them. I guess this is Wikipedia, so en.wikipedia is probably English Wikipedia, and fr Wikipedia is probably French Wikipedia, but there are some that I don't really know. And what would be really cool is if I had a human readable way to see this data. So one approach to doing this is using a lookup, and I can add lookup straight from this console. So to get to the lookup view, I can click here and click lookups. Now, because this is a brand new cluster, I actually have to initialize the lookup system, but that's very easy, one button click. So that's done. Now I just have no lookups. Next, I'm going to add a lookup. And there's many types of lookups you can do. You can basically tell Druid to read some data from anywhere and then present it to you as a key value lookup. But in this case, I'm going to actually use a feature called map, a map lookup. I'm going to supply it inline. And I actually have prepared a quick lookup that I can use here, that I can just paste in here. So right here, I have just a JSON map mapping different Wikipedia channel names to their proper human readable names. So let's give this a name. Let's call it channel name and submit. So now I've submitted my lookup, and it's going to get loaded. It's going to get loaded. I submitted the lookup actually to the coordinator node that is managing the cluster, and it's going to tell all of the worker nodes to load it. One thing to keep in mind when you're working with Druid is that even when you run it on your laptop and all of the processes are running locally, Druid still behaves like a distributed system because it's really built for running across many machines and scaling in a really awesome way. So in this case, I'm just saying this, that when I click submit a lookup, that lookup isn't going to be instantly available everywhere. It's going to take a little bit of time for it to propagate. And as I can see here, it still hasn't made it in, because when a lookup becomes available, I'm going to have a new schema here, lookup. So let's just refresh and see if it is available now. So it looks like my patience has been rewarded, and there's that lookup. All right, there it is. So a lookup actually is just another table. So if I just do a select on it, I can see it has two columns. You could do a select star here and see there's only two columns, K and V. K for key, V for value. But you can use it just like you would use it in SQL. You can use it with a join operator. You can also use it with a lookup function that's specifically built to work with lookups. And I can show you both. So let's go to the main table and say, okay, I want to look at channel. And again, let's remove the time filter to look at all time. Great. And now I can go to my lookup. I'm using the point and click IntelliSense here because I really don't want to type too much. Let's join on the key column, a left join. And I have channel name, lookup, channel, left join, lookup, channel name on lookup channel name.k with wikipedia.channel. That's great. And let's run that. Of course, I don't see anything because I forgot that I should also select the value column. So let's do V and run that. And now I get an error. That's perfectly fair. I mistyped my SQL because I forgot to group on this channel. And you can't have a column in a group by that you're not grouping on or that's not an aggregate. Let's make this 3. And now I have my nice readable name. All is missing is maybe a nice little as channel name. There we go. Very nice. So that's pretty easy. And here I can see the uses of a left join. And you can experiment with all sorts of different types of joins and also self joins. I can also use a lookup function. And a lookup function is just a special SQL function that is a shortcut to doing what I just did. So lookup, and I would say, actually, if I read the description of it, it says lookup takes 2 arguments, expr and a lookup name. So in this case, my expr is channel, and the lookup name is channel lookup. No, it's channel name, like this. I need a comma, as channel name, and I can click run, and I use the wrong quote marks, which the autosuggest helpfully informs me to change it, and that's good. And now I have it running perfectly here. And as you can see, I don't have any join that I had to type out. Well, I didn't type it out the first time either because I used the IntelliSense, but you understand what I'm saying. In any case, these approaches are exactly identical under the hood. And talking about that, you might be wondering, what is happening under the hood? Well, this is a little bit past the quick start, but right here you can see a lot of really useful links, like links to the query documentation, the query history, but this one in particular tells you what is the native Druid query that's being run for this SQL. And if you want to understand more about native Druid queries, I highly recommend that you use this tool. Just type in some SQL query, run it, and see what comes out. Well, thank you for watching. I really hope you give Druid a try and maybe try it with your own data and try querying it with all sorts of stuff. And if you have any suggestions or if you find any issues or you just want to chat, you can reach a vibrant community of Druid enthusiasts on all of these places right here from the question mark. Thank you for tuning in.